Okay, right, we've been getting on quite nicely. We trimmed in these back parts and we've put those holes in there now. Now literally they're just 1mm holes, and at the end I used a file just to round it out, that last hole. But we've done both sides now, they're both done. So then when these end parts, which I haven't quite finished off these yet, when they come in, when they drop down, you can't see because my finger's in the way, if you get what I mean, we're going to be getting this type of effect. So they're like that, so then hopefully we won't have any problems. Bit tricky trying to show you around the wrong way, but it might be better that way. There we go. As you can see with the holes, it looks quite nicely when this is going to be in there like that. Now the other major problem when we're doing this work is cutting out the rear, the outer of the double delta, if you like, where basically the ailerons are. Now what I've done is I've cut these out into like that. Then the lovely thing as well is that they sit quite nicely all there on their own, so we get this type of effect with them leaning down, which is what we're after. Now the way I did that, I didn't glue it together first, because obviously when you see the parts, getting a bit of a mess here, when you see the parts, obviously it's like this, so this one is pre-cut out. So all I did it from the inside, just go along, trim with a knife, and then when you've got this activator, this one back here, literally just cut straight through it, because then when it's on there together, it will just realign up and it looks like it's been pushed in slightly or pulled in to activate. So that's all we did. So literally just trim along, take your time, nice and gently, and then ping it off. Obviously the one to watch out for is this area in here, is the lump bit, the little tooth there, because it doesn't like to actually come out very easily. But it does with a little bit of work. And you'll be okay. So if you get that done, trimmed out, and then what we can do, we can think about in a moment joining these up, which will go on just like that. If I pull you out a bit, you might be able to see more. There we go. I put the air intakes on. I knew these were going to be a problem. You know, they just never fit, quite frankly. So what we've done, we've just literally plonked them on, glued them on. I'm going to let the glue dry on there for about 6 hours, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to sand them in manually. It's a close enough fit, but they're not perfect by a long way. So by the time we sort of sand those in, both of these sides in, and then we actually rescribe a panel line around there, they'll be totally invisible. But I am going to have to get the filler out and fill these, which are the gun bay covers, if you like, because they're just awful. So what I'm going to do first, I'm going to attach the wings with this double delta. Now in dry fitting here, they look absolutely fantastic and they're no problem at all. So hopefully they're not going to need any filler to do that. But what I'm going to do is get the tail on now. It's straightforward, 2 halves together, and the tail goes on. We've got it all here ready to go on, and we're going to get this on. We're going to get the wing tips on. Not worry about putting in the flaps and the ailerons yet, we'll do those afterwards. And then what we can do, we can have a good look round it, and then so we can say, right, okay, it's getting late on the day now, we can get the filler in, let the filler dry overnight, come back in the morning, and then sand it all off and see what we got. Okay, so last thing yesterday, literally I had looked round it, and we had little tiny marks we needed to take care of. So to give it a long time to, you know, for the filler to really get a grip and to dry it totally, I did it just before going to bed last night. So here we are this morning, and it's all ready now for sanding down. Now we knew we was going to have problems around these intakes and certainly around these gun bays, but what we're going to do now is sand it off quite gently and work down and see what we've got. If needed to, we're going to go back again with another coat all over and do it as many times as it's going to need. It's one of those shapes of aircraft which really, you know, needs to be done well, because all the wings and everything blends in. It's all one piece. It's not like you can really hide them too well. So what we're going to do is start sanding off with quite a fine sandpaper, nothing too rough. Now, a lot of people talk about shrinkage when you're sanding, and certainly that is to a point. You have to make sure your the putty that you've put on is completely dry. If it's still got any moisture in it, it's still going to shrink back. A good way to tell is obviously when you're sanding is it's going to be really, really dusty. If it looks dark and wet still, if it looks dark still, it's still going to be a little bit perhaps moist, and you still might be prone to a little bit of shrinkage. But all we're doing with this is really taking off those top crusty bits, if you like, and trying to get down to the workings so we can have a look. So there we go, this is this area done here. If I bring you in, a little bit. And there we go. So we've done this area down here. Then you can come back, and this is where you're going to need your sanding sponges really. Got quite a coarse one here. This is one of the Mastercasters ones. Okay, and we're just doing gentle move, not digging in, but we're making sure we're keeping it flat and covering the area, and sort of doing circular motions and literally just very lightly sanding down. And there we go, we can down. Now sometimes you might get extra little bits like here, still raised up. Obviously we want to rid ourselves of those. Okay, then when you're getting down and happy, you're getting quite near, wet your finger, run it along the area, circular motions again, and this is acting sort of a bit like a wet and dry effect, but you'll find it will get rid of any really stubborn areas quite well, because it will give it that little bit of extra bite. Well, as you can see from the amount of dust and everything I'm covered in, we've basically finished off sanding. The only last thing I like to do is, you know, you get those glue marks with the Tamiya extra thin over your joins. If you just give them a little rub down, you'll get a better view of how your joins all are, because sometimes little imperfections can be disguised that you won't see too well. So I like to give the entire model around. And as I say, this is one of the Mastercaster's finishing sponges. You could use a nail file, in all honesty, it's the same thing, but it's very, very fine. There's hardly any bite to it, but it's nice just to give the entire model a rub over with it. Twofold: one, it gives the paint a bit of a grip to stick to, but also if you have got any little tiny lumps, bumps and bits and pieces on your model, you can just give it a rub over everywhere like this to see what you've got. Now, what we're basically looking at is, we can see we've still got an area down in here which is quite a nasty one, which I'm going to probably refill. But what I'm going to do now is we're going to get a bit of grey. What have we got here? A bit of XF19. Okay, let's give that a shake. It doesn't have to be grey, it can literally be any colour you like. Put that filler in your mouth. Right, okay. Softish brush, nothing, you know, we're only popping this down. We want a softish type brush. So I've got a number, what is this, a number 10, 9, 6, 6 flat. One of them. Okay, so all we do, have it like this, and then we're just going to literally brush it all over those seam lines and where we've actually added anything to. As I said before, if you haven't seen the Jaguar build, I cover it quite extensively, filling and sanding in the Jaguar build. But the reason I do this is twofold. One, it will show any imperfections in your paintwork. Two, the filler tends to be quite absorbent. It tends to suck the moisture out of the paintwork. So obviously when you come along to physically painting your model, it will dry those areas a little bit quicker. Thirdly, the thing that's quite clever with it is it acts as a little bit of filler as well. So every time you sand back, give it a coat of acrylic and you just see where you're at. Now things like down the side here, you know, obviously give it a bit of a going over, and where we put the gum bay in, we're just going to pop a bit more down in there as well. I'm just going to run some along the wing joins we did under here, just so we can have a good look at how they're looking. And as I say, any tiny little imperfections we'll take care. Don't put too much down there because we don't want to ruin that lovely sort of rivet detail. Okay, so we've got those. We'll just do the same across the top. Don't forget, we're going to be sanding most of this all back off, so don't worry about, you know, it looking a mess and horrible. Now you'll find this all dry quite quickly. If it's on a warm day, if it's on a cool day, just take your time with it. And there we go. This is what I really wanted to check as well, was this join round the back end here. So we're just going to put quite a bit down in there. I've got a bit up there to do. Okay, so there we go. As you can see, it's all on there. Now we're going to let that dry. At the same time, I'm going to put together the nose now. We're going to get this bit at the top of the fin on top as well, to have a look. We'll just do these wing tips as well whilst I remember, because I had a tiny little bit of sinkage where I overcooked the glue in slightly. So we'll do that. But as you can see already, it's drying pretty much. So it's not going to take long to dry. But the thing you have to remember is let that totally dry, because if it isn't 100% dry, when you come along to sanding it off, it actually rubs off more than actually sands through. So that's a little thing there. Okay, so at the moment we're doing the nose here. So what we've got is just, I've got some a roll of lead like this, and we're just literally poke some V-shaped ones down in between and done it. Now it calls out for 3mm when you're doing it, but I've had in the past situations where I put the exact amount in and it's still become a tail sitter. So I always tend to go just a little bit over the top. So if we just curve that one round, hopefully it'll fit in there like that. Okay, so then what we're going to do, we're going to grab a bit of our super glue. We're just going to put a drop in there and let it work its way around like so, just let it get in there a bit. Then get your kicker, your CA kicker, and give it a squirt just to get things all going in there. That way it'll stop any deformities coming out. Now don't put in normal your normal glue, because what happens is it'll melt the inside and your nose will come out the wrong type of shape and all the rest of it. So once that's dry on there, I take my basic PVA glue, because what I want to do is just seal in the top. Now the reason for doing both ways is that I've always had a feeling that perhaps over time the actual CA glue might go off, and then before you know it you've got bits rattling around inside your plane in later years. So we take a nice generous blob like this, and we're just going to poke that in the top, down the sides, just to seal up this front area. There we go, something like that. So it's all nicely sealed up. Just ditch that cocktail stick. And obviously we've gone over everywhere, so we're just going to give it a wipe round. And we're just going to take a cotton bud. And we're just going to clean up the top edges. It's going to join the rest of the fuselage, because we want a nice join. And there we go, it's just like that. Now I'm going to leave that just in there to dry and go off before we actually attach it to the front of the Draken. But say in the past I've had experiences where it says, you know, put 3mm in, and then I've put in an extra mil and it's still been a bit of a tail sitter. So I usually pack in as much as I can. I'd rather make sure it doesn't do it than obviously get to the other end, looks lovely, put it on its wheels and back it goes. And so there we go, that's that done. Okay, so what we've got at the moment, we just clear a bit of space. This has now been drying, sort of about half an hour. Some areas still look a little bit wet and a little bit shiny, so I'm still going to leave it to dry. But automatically looking at it, I can see this side is fine, but unfortunately this side is going to need a little bit more filler, which is going to slow us down just a tad whilst we do that. So if we just move that out of the way. Coming in with our quite rough sanding sponge, and we're just going to give it a light rub over. And then we can see where we're going to need sanding and where we're going to need a bit more filler to go in. Rub. And anywhere which is still grey, after you've given it a bit of a rub, it's going to need filler. So if you can see just down here in this area here, it's actually looking a little bit too grey, so it's going to need a bit more. So we're going to work all the way around and have a look. Okay, we've sanded down everywhere. So what we want to do now is just make doubly sure about these joints, because honestly we don't want to be in a situation where we're, you know, all there, all looking great, and then all of a sudden we've got a seam showing through. So what we're doing, we're just going to mask off the canopy. So all the debris in there. Okay, let's get the compressor going. Okay, neat paint, bit of XF19 Tamiya. Just wait for the air pressure to come up. Okay, then all we're going to do pop a bit of that down, save the old mat. Okay, we're just going to spray these areas in so we can check to see how they're going to look, because I'm not overly confident with how they are at the moment. So we're just going to spray the seams and then we can see how they all are before we get the primer coat properly on there to check. Okay, so we're just right, we'll just let that dry a moment and then we can have a look. Okay, so that paint's now dried. Now, to be totally honest, it's one of those things, the top side of this side is fine. This side is not very good. We're going to have to refill that. And on the other side, it's the other way around. Obviously, the bottom here is a complete, really is too small, needs a lot more filler. And on this side is okay. So it's funny how, you know, it's mirroring itself. So what I'm going to do is refill those. Very happy with everywhere else. I'm going to refill those and I'm going to get the nose on, and then we can continue after that by getting these drop flaps on. Okay, so we've refilled down here. Now it's on. I've given it a quick blow with the hairdryer to get things going, but obviously it's going to take a couple of hours really to be sandable again. So I've done both sides and I've redone these front ones and given them a good sanding with a sanding stick. I'm then going to come back here with a sanding sponge and work our way through the grades, and then obviously we're going to have to totally rescribe these front ends. To be honest with you, when I first did this I thought it was going to be quite easy, because dry fitting, it showed they were, you know, basically a good fit and that, but obviously, you know, looks can be deceiving, and really they did take quite a bit of work to get in there. But the thing is, I was saying, because it is such a noticeable airframe and a noticeable aircraft, it's very hard to lose it. Normally I would put a panel line in there where the join is and your eye is diverted because of the step, obviously with the panel line. The panel lining on this is particularly fine in detail, which is great from a modelling point of view, but you can't hide stuff behind it. So this is it. So anyway, on with another coat of filler. Obviously got quite a bit down this side and along the top here, and hopefully that'll be the last of the filler work. Everywhere else is fine. So as we can see, we've got these all totally dry now. So what we're going to do, we've got the nice fine paper, or your sanding sponge. Okay, and we're just going to literally run over the area now to sort of polish it up to see what we've got. Now the reason we're using a nice very fine finish one is because obviously we don't want to dig anything out. We want a nice perfectly smooth finish. That will do. We just wet our finger over the top and it acts like a little bit of wet and dry. Okay, so we've given this all a nice rub down and it feels perfect. I can't actually feel anything at all, but obviously, you know, things can be deceiving to the eye. So what we're going to do is going to flick that compressor on. I've already got some grey, just normal grey acrylic in here. So what we're going to do is just literally spray these areas so we can have a good look to really see what we've got. Because say, looks can be deceiving. So we're just going to have a run there, and I'm very happy with that. The front one has gone in perfectly well, and this rear one you really can't see it. So I'm happy with that. But that one was always the better one of the two. So we just do this side as well. And that one on this side is fine as well. That's disappeared. Very happy with the intake. So we just got to check the lower side. And they're all okay as well. I've got a tiny little bit just down here on this one which I'm going to take care of. So we just check this front join as well, all around this nose. Yeah, and I'm more than happy that off. There we go. Yeah, more than happy with those. Really, we can't see any of those joints anymore. There's a tiny bit down here which I'm just going to resand, but that side's fine with the gun side. The nose, the side joins for the top and bottom fuselage coming together there, it's fine. The front ones are absolutely perfect. I love those, they're great. Wing ones I've already checked out as well as the back. So what we're going to do now is just let that dry, just whip the hairdryer over it in a minute. And then we're going to rescribe all those panel lines that unfortunately we've obliterated in the process. Okay, this is one of those things where when you come into rescribe and you've totally obliterated it, you know, normally we can use our P cutter and go around and follow through. But what I'm going to hope to show you is a couple of techniques for making nice good panel lines without too much trouble. Now I've already done this side, I've completely rescribed this side. So if we just bring you in a mo, you can have a look-see. I don't know how well you're going to be able to see this, but as you see we've got in there and I've just completely redone every single panel line that we took out. As I say, I don't know how well that's picking up on camera because I can't really see, but what I basically have, because over on this side, as you can see here, this area all here, there's no panel lines left there at all because with the amount of sanding and filling that we've done, we've just worn them all totally away. Now the thing is, when you're doing it and you've lost the lot, you're going to need your instructions back again. Now usually if you go to your actual the painted section, it's got a pretty good layout of all the panel lines and where they all are and things like that. So then you can just basically work out roughly and you should be able to see some perhaps faint little images left behind. Two things to do with rescribing. Obviously we've got a P cutter, which is great for doing nice big flat lines, gentle curves, things like that. Not very good over the top of putty, admittedly, because it tends to dig in and scratch. This is where this one comes in. All I've actually got here, if I show you, is a pin vise with a sewing needle inside it. There's just a standard sewing needle in the end there. Screw it up nice and tight. It's not massively sharp, don't get me wrong, this isn't going to be really scratchy. It's quite not blunt, it's sharp, don't get me wrong, but it's not as, you know, it's not like pin sharp. It's your sort of standard sewing needle. Now the other thing as well is obviously when you're doing any type of scribing, you need it to be nice and firm, because the last thing you want to be doing is you're in there, you're in here, something like this, you've got your template on as well and everything, and you've got movement and you go and it slips and things like that. So what you're going to need is a bit of blue tack and basically lock the actual models down to the surface. Now this is a bit tricky for me because obviously I need to show you guys, so I'm going to have to do it on the other side. But what we're going to do, we're going to put a bit of blue tack down on the front and we're going to put a bit of blue tack at the back. Okay, we've got to keep our instructions handy to where we are. Okay, so that's in there now and it can't move around. Now other little things you can do, have a look around your bench and find something that's roughly the right height. Like here we got some a bottle of paint here. If we put that down underneath that wing, a bit of blue tack, and there we go. This is completely solid. It isn't going to go anywhere, and that's the first thing. When you're scribing as well, you got, obviously I use quite flexible, quite bendy tri-tools. These are the Hasegawa ones. They're on the forum. We've spoken about them before. Some people like to use Dymo tape. You know, it seems a quite expensive way of doing it, but don't forget, as I said before, you can cut these in 3 and put them down. Great for bending round surfaces because there again, this is far more bendy. Obviously, the other thing as well, you stick it down and you don't have to hold it, which is quite a handy way of doing it. For doing this type of tight work and obviously over a filler surface, I tend to use a pin vise rather than a P cutter. If it was just glue, I'd go everywhere with a P cutter, but as I say, you tend to, because it's got the two, you go along and then all of a sudden you're going to get to where the filler is and it'll dig in, and before you know, you've taken a chunk out. When you are using any type of scriber, as I've always said, nice light passes. You're better off to make 15 or 20 light passes than one bad one. So it's always best to let it sort of build up. So what we're going to do, we're going to start off in here, and I've stuck it slightly in the wrong place, but we'll work through it. Now, having a look down, you can possibly see where various panel lines are and bits and pieces. So if I bring you in a bit, okay, so there we go, with something like that, and then we can come along and we place our tri-tool down. Okay, then we've got to find out where it's going to end, and where it's going to end, I'm going to put a little dot. Now the reason I put a little dot is so when I come along with my pin vise here with the needle in, as soon as I get to the dot, it will stop. It will actually physically stop on it, and it will give me a little guide to how far to go. Then obviously, as I say, I'm doing this upside down So anything could happen now. Okay, you're going to replace the dot at the end where we need it. Okay, and we're running down just like that. That's that panel line back in. Okay, put dot down the end. And there we go, that's that one in as well. And we work around the entire model doing that in there. So if you put the dots at the end, you can see how far you go. The other way you can do it, of course, is grab a little bit of Dymo tape, like this. Okay, you peel off your backing, which is always the tricky bit. So you stick it up the inside of your nail. Okay, so you have it like that, so you know how far you're going to go. You don't want to go any further. Okay, and then just place that and stick that at the end there. Then you're just going to come along with your tri-tool, same as you did before. Okay, so you go up there and you scribe along and you get to it and bang. So if you're using your P cutter, you come along and bang, you can't go any further. And it's always handy because there's nothing worse when you skid too far over and you have to fill that panel line back up, especially if you're using something like a P cutter, you know, that tends to make quite a good trench as it goes. So that's what you're going to do. You're going to work everywhere, and we're just going to put these all back in. As I say, you'll be able to see it better when it's got a wash and a bit of paint on it and everything. But say certainly we've obliterated anywhere down here, both sides, top and bottom, in the process. Obviously, the other thing you can do, being very careful as you do it, but take your blade and you're just going to pop round all the other little areas, scribe out any putty dust and things that you've got anywhere on your actual model. Because the thing is, if it's in there now, you put a paint on top of it, it's going to sort of weld it in, and you don't want that type of effect. And there we go. What I've done now is I've gone around with the pin vise and gently just got out all the bits of filler and the mess that are in the panel lines and re-scribed any which I thought were a little bit light, just to sort of even them up, especially down here underneath, obviously, the areas where we were near. So I don't know how well you should be able to see now, but with the filler dust and the bits and pieces in here, as you can see, we're all totally re-scribed around the front and around there, and the same on the other side as there. So basically what we can do now, we can carry on, we can start to install various bits and pieces onto this one, and then we can get some primer on.